The French Foreign Legion brought the coffins of Missak and Manouchian to the gates of the Panthéon. It'll be the Republican Guard that will take them through those doors when they open. The couple who will be laid to rest after a speech coming up by the French President Emmanuel Macron. There you see those pallbearers from the Republican Guard who will be taking them inside of the mausoleum where the greats of the Republic lie, including other members of the French resistance, people like Victor Hugo as well, Marc, Perelman, and this edition coming, again, 80 years to the day after they were executed by the Germans in a Paris prison.
Right. There are already members, as you said, of the resistance, but not communists and not foreigners. Jean Moulin was inducted in 1964 already, and in the last decade or so, we have other Pierre Brossolette, Jean Zay, Germaine Tillion, and Geneviève Antonios de Gaulle, women, men, but not communists and not foreigners. And so this is really a new dimension where we heard from where Missak Manouchian was coming. We saw the images. We heard the names of the others who were coming from all across Europe to fight as communists, as resistance to the Nazis. Obviously, let's not forget that they were hunted down and arrested by the French police, handed to the Germans, who then executed them. This was a dark era. The French resistance was clearly not a majority. Let's not forget that. You had the Vichy regime. And so this is obviously a tribute to the resistance, to the foreign resistance at a time when the French were not all resistance by far.
And we're hearing the cellist Astrid Cyranosian playing Grunk, the Bird of Armenia, there as the two coffins make their way through those doors inside of the Panthéon mausoleum. Andrew Smith, it's the French police that arrested the members of the Manouchian group.
That's right. It was French collaborationist intelligence services that unfortunately first spotted Manouchian in September of '43. It was then, unfortunately, a member of his organization who was captured, interrogated, and eventually gave up the names of other resistors as well. And that's what led to this roundup, which took place in November. And that was really what led, sadly, directly to his execution by the German authorities. So yes, as you said there, I think really important to acknowledge that this was not something that was simply done from outside, something that was done and alien to France, but this was, in some ways, someone who chose to be French, chose what it meant to be French, and stood up for that, beset by some who had simply, as we heard, inherited that title. And I think what it conveys really is the importance that we're seeing taken into the Panthéon right now about what those values mean, and about what it means to be recognised in that way, what this idea of patriotism really means in that context.
Seeing it through the 2024 eyes, Andrew Smith, what message is Emmanuel Macron conveying?
Well, Emmanuel Macron has consistently reached back to the resistance. If you think back to his first election, he was of course embraced by Daniel Cordier, the secretary to Jean Moulin, whose ashes lie in the Panthéon itself. Of course, if you remember his inauguration, riding down the Gaullist style idea of down the Champs-Élysées, he has consistently reached to the resistance as a symbol of a certain idea of French grandeur and a certain idea of French values. It's something he has again reached for in this moment, but I think it's important that he's doing so in a way which recognises the pluralism of those values, that it is not simply about blood and citizenship, but actually about standing up for something much bigger. And I think what he's going to be talking about again is this idea of reconciliation, this idea of action, this idea of values. And I think those are the types of things we'll likely see in his speech to come.
Marc Perelman, it won't be the Emmanuel Macron who's been accused in past days of pandering to the far right.
Obviously, with an immigration bill that caused a lot of controversy, a lot of infighting within his own majority, he was accused of essentially towing to the right and even the far right. And so this is his answer in a way, because he gave also an interview a few days ago to L'Humanité, the communist newspaper, in which he said he didn't consider the national rally as part of the Republican arch. And this was contradicting something his own Prime Minister, Gabriel Attal, who was also in attendance here, said a few days ago, and some remarks that Emmanuel Macron made a while ago. Clearly, there is a problem here in France for Emmanuel Macron. His main rival, the National Rally, is riding high in the polls. They're likely to win the forthcoming European Parliament election. So Emmanuel Macron is sometimes waltzing towards the far right, sometimes going back, as today's celebration implies, and probably what we're going to hear from him. The message that France is about choice, about diversity, not about where you come from, what your name sounds like. So we'll have to see what the president will have to say, but this is clearly a very solemn address. Let's not forget that there's the Armenian prime minister. We're seeing him, Nikol Pashinyan, alongside the president. That's also a symbol of Franco-Armenian friendship throughout the years and throughout the difficult times, because Missak Manouchian was born in Armenia, and his parents essentially died during the genocide in that country in 1950.
And Méline Manouchian returned to Armenia after the war. Emmanuel Macron, who has been a steadfast ally of the Armenians through, it's been a difficult couple of years.
Absolutely, and he even met the Prime Minister of Armenia today and vowed that France would continue to support Armenia and would continue to provide some quote-unquote defensive military aid to Armenia. Right now, they're entangled in a bitter fight with their neighbor Azerbaijan, as the French president heads towards the podium and will deliver his speech honoring Missak and Méline Manouchian.
Est-ce donc ainsi que les hommes
Is
vivent?
this how men live?
Des dernières heures,
From
dans
his
la
last
clairière du Mont
hours in the
Valérien,
clearing of Mont
à cette
Valérien
montagne
to this
Sainte-Geneviève,
montagne Sainte-Geneviève,
une odyssée du
a
XXe siècle
20th
s'achève,
century odyssey comes to an end.
celle d'un destin de liberté,
His destiny was freedom,
qui depuis Aman,
leaving
survivant
Aman,
au génocide
surviving the
de
1915 genocide,
de famille arménienne
from
en famille
Armenian
kurde,
family to Kurdish
refuge
family,
au
finding
Liban avant de
refuge in
rejoindre la
Lebanon
France,
before joining France,
décide de mourir
deciding
pour
to
notre
die for
nation
our
qui
nation,
pourtant
which,
avait refusé
however,
de l'adopter
never fully adopted him.
Reconnaissance en ce
Recognition on this day
jour d'un destin
of a European
européen,
destiny,
du Caucase au
from the
Panthéon,
Caucasus to the
et
Pantheon,
avec lui
and with it,
de cet
of this
international
international
de la liberté,
of
de
freedom,
l'amour et du courage.
love, and courage.
Oui,
Yes,
cette odyssée,
this odyssey,
celle de Manouche
that of
et de tous ses
Manouche
compagnons
and all of his
d'armes,
comrades in
est aussi la
arms,
nôtre,
is our
odyssée de
odyssey
liberté
also, the odyssey of
et de
freedom
sa part
and of
ineffaçable
its indelible
dans
part
le cœur de
in the
notre
heart
nation.
of our nation.
Reconnaissance
Recognition
en cette
in
heure
this hour
de leur part
of
de
their part
résistance,
in the resistance,
6 décennies après Jean
60
Moulin.
years after Jean Moulin.
Est-ce ainsi que les hommes
Is this how men live?
Oui,
Yes,
s'ils sont libres.
if they are free.
Libres,
Free,
Missak
Missak
Manouchian
Manouchian
l'était quand
was
il gravissait la rue
when he
Soufflot,
climbed Rue
en
Soufflot,
fixant ce Panthéon
staring
qu'il
at our
accueille aujourd'hui,
Panthéon, which
libre.
welcomes him today.
Sur les bancs de
Free,
la bibliothèque
on the benches of the
Sainte-Geneviève,
Sainte-Geneviève Library,
à quelques mètres d'ici,
just a few meters from here,
découvrant notre
discovering
littérature
our
et
literature
polissant ses idéaux,
and polishing
libre
our
avec
ideals,
Baudelaire,
free with
dans le
Baudelaire
vert paradis
in the
qui avait le
green
goût de son
paradise,
enfance,
which had
dans
the
une
taste of his
Arménie heureuse,
childhood, in a
celle des
happy Armenia,
montagnes,
that of
des torrents et du
mountains,
soleil.
rushing rivers, and the sun,
libre avec
free
Verlaine,
with Verlaine,
dont les fantômes
whose
saturniens
Saturnian
croisaient les
ghosts
siens.
crossed paths
Son père,
with his
Kevork,
own,
tué par
his
les armes
father Kevork, who was killed in
des
battle
soldats
by
ottomans
Ottoman soldiers,
sous ses yeux d'enfant.
under his child's eyes.
Sa mère,
His mother,
Vartoui, morte de faim,
Vartoui,
de maladie,
dead of hunger and illness,
victime du
victims of the
génocide des
Armenian
Arméniens,
genocide,
spectres
visions
qui vont hanter
which
sa vie.
haunted his life.
libre.
Free,
Libre avec
with
Rimbaud, après une saison
after
en
a
enfer,
season in
souvenirs
hell,
partagés avec son
memories
frère
shared with his
Garabed.
brother
Mais voici
Garabed,
les
but here are the
illuminations,
illuminations, the enlightenment,
celles qu'un
as
instituteur de
taught to him by a
l'orphelinat au
teacher in the
Liban
orphanage in
lui
Lebanon,
enseigna. Éveil à la langue,
awakening
à la
to the
culture
French
française.
language and culture.
Libre,
Free,
libre avec
with Victor Hugo
et
and
la
the
légende
legend
des
of
siècles.
centuries,
Gloire de sa libre
glory of
patrie,
his free
la France,
homeland, France,
terre d'accueil pour
land
les
of welcome
misérables,
for
vers
the
laquelle
downtrodden,
Missak, la
land
patride,
chosen by the
choisit à
stateless
18 ans de
Missak,
s'embarquer.
at the age of
Ivre,
18,
écrivait-il,
drunk as he
d'un
wrote,
grand rêve
with a
de
great
liberté.
dream of freedom.
Lui,
He,
Missak,
Missak,
maraudeur,
marauder,
étranger,
foreigner,
malhabile,
inept,
pour reprendre
to
les mots
use the
d'un
words
autre
of another
poète et
poet,
combattant qui
a
choisit
fighter
la
who
France,
chose France,
Guillaume
Guillaume
Apollinaire.
Apollinaire,
Étranger,
stranger,
orphelin.
orphan,
Bientôt en
soon
deuil de
in
son
mourning
frère
for
tombé
his brother
malade,
who fell
et
ill,
pourtant à la
and yet
tâche,
on the
ouvrier
job,
chez Citroën,
working
quai
at
de
the
Javel,
Citroën plant and Quai de
il s'enfuit
Javel,
soudain,
suddenly made redundant,
tremblant si
sometimes
souvent,
trembling with
froid,
cold
et de
and
faim.
hunger.
Est-ce ainsi que les hommes vivent?
Is this how men live?
Ainsi,
So,
le soir,
in the evening,
après l'usine,
after the factory,
Missak
Missak Manouchian studies.
Ainsi, sous les
So,
rayonnages de
under the
livres,
bookshelves,
Missak
Missak
Manouchian traduit les
Manouchian
poètes français en
translates French
arménien.
poets into Armenian.
Ainsi écrit-il
So
lui-même,
he himself
mots
writes
de mélancolie,
words
de
of
privation,
melancholy, of deprivation,
brûlés du froid des hivers
burned by the
parisiens.
cold Parisian winter.
Mots d'espoir aussi
Words
rendus
of
plus chauds
hope,
par la
also
fraternité
made
des
warmer by
exilés,
the brotherhood of exiles,
par la
by the
solidarité de la diaspora
solidarity of the
arménienne, par
Armenian
le foisonnement
diaspora,
d'art et de
by the
musique,
abundance of art
des
and
revues
music,
et des cours en
magazines
Sorbonne,
and courses at the Sorbonne University,
poète et
poet
révolté.
and rebel.
Quand les ligues fascistes
When the
défilent en
fascist leagues marched
1934
in
au cœur de
1934
Paris,
in the heart of Paris,
Missak Manouchian va
Missak saw
revivre
the
sous ses
poison
yeux
of
le poison
ignorance
de l'ignorance
revive
et les
before his
mensonges
eyes,
raciaux qui
and the
précipitèrent
racial
en
lies
Arménie
which
sa famille à la
precipitated
mort.
his family to their death
Est-ce
in
donc
Armenia.
ainsi que les
Is
hommes
this
vivent?
how men live?
Non.
No.
Alors Missak
So
Manouchian
Missak
embrasse
Manouchian
l'idéal communiste,
embraces the communist ideal,
convaincu que jamais en
convinced that
France on
never
n'a pu
in France
impunément
have we been
séparer
able to
République et
separate
Révolution.
republic and revolution with
Après
impunity.
1789,
After
après
1789, after
1793, il rêve
1793,
l'émancipation
he dreamed of
universelle
universal
pour les damnés de la
emancipation
terre.
for the wretched of
Et
the
c'est
earth.
ainsi
This
que
is
Missak
how
Manouchian
Missak Manouchian
s'engage
became involved
contre le fascisme,
against fascism
au sein de
with the
l'international
Communist
communiste, et
International,
bientôt à la
and
tête
soon
d'une
at the head of a
revue,
magazine,
Zangu, du
Zangu,
nom d'une rivière
named after a
d'Arménie.
river in Armenia.
Espoir
The
du Front
hope of the
populaire,
Popular Front, the
enthousiasme pour les
desire to
brigades
join the
internationales
international
des
brigades in
républicains
Spain
espagnols,
for
Missak
militant
s'engage.
action. This is how Missak
C'est
Manouchian
ainsi
also
que Missak Manouchian trouve l'amour.
finds love.
Méliné.
Méliné,
Méliné, enfant du
Méliné,
génocide
child of
des
the
Arméniens comme
Armenian
lui.
genocide, like
Méliné,
Missak. Méliné,
protégée par l'amitié de
protected
ses
by the
logeurs,
friendships of her
les
landlords,
Aznavourians,
the
parents
Aznavourians,
de Charles,
parents of
10 ans
Charles,
alors,
10 years
déjà
old at the
chanteur.
time, already a singer.
L'amour,
Love,
malgré le dénuement.
despite deprivation.
Ignorer le passé,
Ignore the past,
conjuguer le
embrace
futur,
the future,
l'amour fou.
crazy love.
Je vous parle d'un
I'm
temps que
talking to
ces gens de
you
20
about
ans,
Missak and
Missak et
Méliné,
Méliné, ont
20
tant aimé
years old,
connaître.
full of life,
Libre,
free in France.
ce pays que
This
Missak
country
a
that
choisi
Missak chose
adolescent,
as a
qui lui a
teenager,
offert
which
des mots
offered
pour
him
rêver,
words to
un
dream,
refuge
a,
pour se
a
relever,
refuge to get
une
back on his
culture pour
feet, a culture
s'émanciper.
to emancipate himself.
Alors Missak Manouchian hisse
So Missak
haut notre
Manouchian
drapeau tricolore
hoisted our tricolor
lors de
flag
ses
high
150 ans de la
during the
Révolution,
150th anniversary of the
1939,
revolution
quand
in
il défile dans le
1939
stade de
when he
Montrouge.
paraded at the
Alors,
Montrouge Stadium.
pour servir
So
ce
to serve
drapeau,
this flag,
Missak
Missak
Manouchian
Manouchian
demande par 2
twice
fois à
asks
devenir
to become
français.
French.
En vain.
In vain,
car la France
because
avait
France had
oublié
forgotten
sa
its
vocation
vocation of
d'asile
providing
aux
asylum to the
persécutés.
persecuted.
Alors, quand la guerre
So,
éclate,
when war breaks out,
Missak
Missak
Manouchian veut
Manouchian
s'engager.
wants to get involved,
Ivre de liberté,
drunk with freedom,
enivré de courage,
intoxicated with
enragé de
courage,
défendre le pays
keen
qui
to
lui a
defend
tout
the
donné,
country that gave
tigre
him
enchaîné,
everything,
selon
the
ses mots de
chained
poète,
tiger, as
dans
he
les
said in
prisons
his
où le
poetic
jette la
words,
peur
in the
des
prisons
étrangers, la peur
where
des
the fear of
communistes,
foreigners, the
sous les
fear of
miradors du camp
communists
allemand
landed
où
him
il est
under the
détenu
watchtowers of
en
the German camp,
1941,
where he was detained in
et où
1941, where Méliné
vient
came
contre tous les
against
périls
all dangers
lui apporter
to
des
bring him food.
Est-ce ainsi que les
Is
hommes
this
vivent?
how men live?
Oui,
Yes.
au prix du
At the
choix
price of the
délibéré,
deliberate, determined,
déterminé,
repeated
répété
choice
de la
of
liberté.
freedom.
Car dans Paris
Because
occupé,
in occupied Paris,
Missak Manouchian
Missak
rejoint la
Manouchian
résistance
joined the
communiste
communist
au
resistance
sein de la
within
main-d'œuvre
the
immigrée,
immigrant workforce,
la
the
MOI.
MOI.
Il se voulait poète,
He wanted to be
il
a
devient
poet.
soldat de l'ombre,
He became a shadow soldier,
plongé dans l'enfer d'une
plunged
vie
into the hell
clandestine,
of a
une vie
clandestine
vouée à
life,
faire de
a
Paris un
life
enfer pour les soldats
dedicated to
allemands,
making Paris a
guerre
hell for
psychologique
German
pour
soldiers,
signifier à l'occupant
psychological
que les
war to show
Français
the
n'ont rien
occupier that the
abdiqué de
French
leur
had not
liberté.
yet abdicated any of their freedoms.
Encore,
Again,
toujours,
always,
ivre d'un grand
drunk
rêve de
with a great
liberté,
dream of freedom,
Missak Manouchian
Missak
prend tous les
Manouchian
risques.
took all risks.
Lui qui aime aimer,
He who
se résout à
loved to
tuer.
love resolved to kill.
Comme ce jour de mars
Like that day on March
1943 où il lance
1943
une
when he
grenade
threw
dans
a
les rangs d'un
grenade into the
détachement
ranks
allemand.
of a German detachment.
Est-ce ainsi
Is this how
que
men
les hommes rêvent?
dream?
Oui,
Yes.
les armes à la
Weapons in
main.
hand.
Et d'autres sont là,
Others beside him.
à ses côtés,
Others
parce qu'ils sont
will
chassés de la
die with
surface du
him
monde
because
ont
they are
décidé de
driven
se
from the
battre
face of the world and have
le
decided to
sol de
fight
la
for the
patrie.
soil of their homeland.
Parce que nombre
Because
d'entre eux
many
sont
of them
juifs
are
et que
Jews,
certains ont vu leurs
and some
proches
saw their loved
déportés.
ones deported.
Lebs Goldberg,
Lej Goldberg,
Maurice
Maurice
Fingerschweig,
Fingerschweig,
Marcel
Marcel
Rajman.
Rajman.
Parce que la guerre a
Because the
volé
war
leurs
stole
écoles et
their
leurs
schools and
ateliers
their
dans ce
workshops
Paris
in
populaire
this
et
popular
ouvrier où le
working
français
class
se mêle à
Paris where
l'italien
French mixes
ou
with
yiddish.
Italian and Yiddish languages.
Parce que les forces
Because
de
the
haine ont
forces
volé
of
leur
hatred
passé
stole their
là-bas,
past over there
en Arménie,
in Armenia,
tel
like
Armenak Manouchian.
Armenak Manouchian.
Parce que ce sont les
Because there are
femmes
women
qui veulent
who want to
œuvrer
work for
pour
the
l'avenir de
future of
l'homme comme
mankind, like
Méliné,
Méliné,
comme la
like the
Roumaine
Romanian Golda
Bancic
Bancic,
et comme tant
like
d'autres.
so many others.
Armes et bombes
Weapons and
qu'elles
bombs that they
acheminent sans
transport
soupçon,
without suspicion,
filatures
shadowing
qu'elles
that they carried
accomplissent
out
sans
with
trembler.
nerves of steel.
Parce qu'ils sont une
Because
bande
they
de
are a group
copains,
of friends
à la
in
vie,
life
à la mort.
and until death.
À l'âge des serments
They shared a bond
invincibles,
of invincible
tel
oaths,
Thomas Elek,
such as with
Wolf
Thomas
Wachbrot,
Elek and Wolf
une
Wachbrot.
belle équipe
They
comme
were a
sur un
great
terrain de
team, like on a
football,
football pitch,
panache de
with the
Rino
panache of Rino de la Negra,
jeune
a young
espoir alors
prospect of
du
the
Red
Red
Star.
Star Club.
Parce qu'ils ont vu
Because
mourir
they
la
saw
liberté dans
freedom die
l'Italie de
in
leurs
the Italy
parents,
of their parents,
comme
like
Antoine
Antoine
Salvadori,
Salvadori,
Cesare
Cesare
Lucarini,
Lucarini,
Amedeo
Amedeo
Celio,
Ucelio,
Fontano,
Spartaco Fontano,
parce qu'ils ont
because
vu
they saw
les
the
hommes de fer
warmongers take
s'emparer de la
over
Pologne et
Poland and
persécuter les
persecute the
Juifs,
Jews,
comme
like
Jonas
Jonas
Geduldig,
Geduldig,
Salomon
Salomon
Shapira,
Shapira,
Slama
Slama
Grivach,
Grivach.
parce qu'ils sont pour beaucoup
Because many of
les anciens
them
des
were
brigades
veterans of the
internationales en
international
Espagne,
brigades in
pays de
Spain, the
Celestino
country of
Alfonso,
Celestino Alfonso,
et pour qui sonne le glas?
for whom the bell tolls,
Pour les Polonais, Joseph
for the
Epstein,
Poles, Joseph Epstein and Stanislas Kubacki,
pour les
for the
Hongrois,
Hungarians,
Joseph
Joseph
Boxov
Botskov
et
and
Emmerich Glass,
Emmerich Glass.
eux les experts en
They were
sabotage
experts in
au fardeau de
sabotage,
dynamite,
carrying loads of dynamite,
parce qu'ils ont 20 ans.
because they're 20 years
Le
old.
temps d'apprendre à
Time to
vivre, le
learn
temps
to
d'apprendre à
live,
se
time
battre.
to learn to
Ainsi
fight.
de ces
So
Français
these
refusant le
French people
STO, Roger Rouxel,
refused
Roger
Germany's
Cloarec
forced labor
et Robert
services,
Vichy,
STO, Roger Rouxel, Roger Cloarec, Robert Vichy,
parce qu'ils sont communistes.
because they're communists.
Ils ne
They
connaissent
know
rien d'autre
nothing
que la
other than
fraternité
human
humaine,
brotherhood,
enfants de la
children of the
Révolution
French
française,
Revolution,
guetteurs
watching
de la
over the
Révolution
universal
universelle.
revolution.
Ces 24 noms
These 24 names
sont ceux-là que simplement je cite,
that
mais
I
avec eux tout le
quoted here,
cortège des FTP
but
MOI,
all of the
trop longtemps
DFTP
confinés dans
and
l'oubli.
MOI, participants
Oui.
have been too long kept in the
Parce qu'à
shadows.
prononcer leurs noms sont
Yes,
difficiles.
because it is difficult to pronounce
Parce
their
qu'ils
names.
multiplient les déraillements de
Because
trains
they
et les attaques
increasingly
contre les
derailed
nazis.
trains and
Parce
attacked
que ces
Nazis.
combattants sont
Because these
parvenus à
fighters managed
exécuter un
to
haut
execute
dignitaire
a
du Reich.
highly
Les
ranked
voilà plus
member
traqués
of the
que
Reich.
jamais.
They are hunted more
Dans
assiduously
leurs
than
pas
ever. In their
marchent les
footsteps
inspecteurs de la préfecture de
walk the
police,
inspectors from the police headquarters,
la police qui
the police who
collabore, la
collaborated,
police de
the
Bousquet,
police
de
of
Laval, de
Bousquet,
Pétain,
Laval, Pétain,
et l'ombre des
and the
rafles
shadow of
grandit.
the raids grew.
À l'automne
In the fall of
1943,
1943,
devenu
having
dirigeant
become the military
militaire des
leader of the
FTP-MOI
Parisian
parisiens,
FTP-MOI,
Missak
Missak
Manouchian
Manouchian
les presse. La fin approche.
had a premonition. The end was
Pour
approaching.
alerter ses camarades, il se
To
rend au
alert his
rendez-vous
comrades,
fixé avec
he
son
went to the meeting
supérieur,
arranged with his superior,
Joseph
Joseph Epstein,
un matin de
one
novembre.
morning in November.
Missak
Missak
Manouchian avait vu
Manouchian
juste.
was right.
Lui et ses
He and his
camarades
comrades were taken,
sont pris, torturés,
tortured,
jugés dans un procès de
tried in
propagande
a
organisé par
propaganda
les
trial
nazis.
organized by the
en
Nazis
février
in February
1944.
1944.
Est-ce ainsi que les hommes vivent?
Is this how men live?
S'ils sont
If
résolument
they are
libres.
resolutely free, yes.
À la barre du
At the bar of the
tribunal,
court,
ils endossent
they proudly
fièrement ce dont leur juge nazi
stood
les
by what
accable.
their Nazi judges
Leurs
accused
actes,
them of, their actions,
communisme,
their communism,
leur
their
vie de
life as
juifs,
Jews, as
d'étrangers,
foreigners,
insolents,
insolent,
tranquilles,
calm,
libres.
free.
Vous avez hérité de
You
la
have
nationalité
inherited French
française.
nationality,
Lance Manouchian aux
said
policiers
Missak
collaborateurs.
Manouchian to
Nous,
the collaborating
nous l'avons
police
mérité.
officers, but we have earned it.
Étrangers et nos
Foreigners
frères
and our
pourtant.
brothers nonetheless.
Français de
French by
préférence.
choice,
Français
through
d'espérance.
hope.
Comme les pêcheurs
Like
de
the
l'île de
fishermen
Saint,
of the Ile de
comme d'autres
Saint,
jeunes
like
de
other
16
young
ans, de
people,
20
just
ans, de
16,
30 ans,
20, 30
comme les
years
ombres des
old,
maquis
like
de
the fighters
Corrèze,
in
les
the back
combattants de
country of
Koufra,
Corrèze, the
ou les
fighters of
assiégés du
Kufra,
Vercors,
or the besieged of the
Français de
Vercors, French
naissance,
by birth,
Français
French by
d'espérance,
hope,
ceux qui
those who
croyaient au
believed in
ciel et ceux qui
heaven,
n'y
those
croyaient
who did
pas,
not
ceux qui
believe,
défendaient les
those who
Lumières
defended the
et ne se
Enlightenment
dérobèrent
and did
pas.
not shy away.
Est-ce ainsi
Is this
que les hommes
how
meurent?
men die?
Ce 21
On
février
February 21st,
1944,
1944,
ceux-là affrontent la
they
mort.
faced death.
Dans la clairière du
In
Mont
the clearing of
Valérien,
Mont Valérien, Missak
Missak
Manouchian's
Manouchian a le cœur qui se fend.
heart is breaking.
Le lendemain,
The next day,
c'est l'anniversaire de
the
son mariage avec
22nd, is the
Méliné.
anniversary of his marriage to Méliné.
Ils n'auront pas d'enfants,
They won't have children,
mais elle aura la vie
but she
devant
will
elle.
have her life ahead of her.
Il vient de
He
tracer
has
ses mots
just
d'amour sur le
written
papier.
his words of love on paper.
Amour d'une femme jusqu'au
For
don
love
de
of a woman,
l'avenir.
the gift of the
Amour
future.
de la France
For love of France,
jusqu'au don de sa
the
vie.
gift of his life.
Amour des
For
peuples
love of people,
jusqu'au don
to
du
the
pardon.
point of the gift of forgiveness.
Aujourd'hui, il y a du
Today,
soleil.
it's sunny.
Missak Manouchian est à
Missak
ce point
Manouchian
libre et
is so
confiant dans le
free and
genre humain
confident in
qu'il n'est
humankind
plus que volonté.
that he is nothing but will,
Volonté
the
d'amour.
will to love.
Délié du
Freed
ressentiment,
from resentment,
affranchi du
freed from
désespoir.
despair,
Certain que
certain
le
that
siècle
the
lui
century
rendra
will do him
justice comme il le
justice,
fait
as it does
aujourd'hui.
today, that
Que
his
ses bourreaux seront
executioners will be
défaits et que
defeated,
l'humanité
and that humanity
triomphera.
will triumph.
Car qui meurt
Because
pour la
he who
liberté
dies for
universelle
universal freedom
a toujours raison
is
devant l'histoire.
always right in the face of history.
Est-ce ainsi que les hommes meurent?
Is this how men die?
En tout cas, les
In
hommes
any
libres.
case, free men.
En tout cas,
In any case,
ces Français
these
d'espérance.
French people of hope.
Je ne suis qu'un soldat qui
I
meurt
am
pour
only
la
a
France.
soldier who dies for France.
Je sais pourquoi
I
je
know
meurs
why I am dying,
et j'en suis très
and I
fier.
am very proud of it.
Ces mots seront ceux de
Wrote
l'Espagnol
the
Celestino
Spaniard
Alfonso
Celestino Alfonso
juste avant l'exécution.
just before his execution.
Et ce 21 février
And on February 21st,
1944,
1944,
ce sont bien 22 pactes
there were
de sang
22
versés,
pacts of bloodshed
scellés entre ces
sealed
destins
between
et
these
la liberté de
destinies
la
and the
France.
freedom of France.
Pactes scellés
Pacts
par le
sealed
sang
by
du
the blood of
sacrifice.
sacrifice.
Un peu avant,
A little
Avec
earlier,
la
with
force
the
que leur
strength
laissent les mois de
left in them
torture,
by
ils
the
ont
months
crié
of torture,
«
they
À bas les
shouted,
nazis,
"Down with the
vive le
Nazis!
peuple allemand !»
Long life to the German
Conduits au
people!"
poteau, 4
Led to
par
the
4,
posts
les yeux
4 by
bandés,
4,
sauf ceux
blindfolded,
qui le
except
refusent,
those who refused.
tombés,
They
les
fell,
corps
their
déchiquetés,
bodies torn to
en
pieces
salves,
in 6 volleys of fire.
tombés.
Fallen,
Comme tombera fusillé
as
en
Joseph
avril au Mont
Epstein
Valérien,
fell,
Joseph
shot in
Epstein,
April at Mont
qui sous la
Valérien.
torture ne
Under
donnera
torture,
aucun nom,
not only did
pas
he
même
give
le
no
sien,
other names, he did not give his
démontrant
own
jusqu'au
name,
bout son courage.
demonstrating his courage to the
Tombé.
end.
Comme
Fallen,
tombera,
as the head
tranché,
of
la
Golda
tête de
Banshee,
Golda Banshik,
severed,
exécutée en
as
mai
she was
à l'abri des
executed in
regards dans une
May
prison de
at a
Stuttgart.
Stuttgart prison out of
Tombés.
sight.
Ils sont
Fallen,
tombés et leurs
they
bourreaux
fell,
voulurent les
and their
exécuter à
executioners
nouveau
wanted to execute
par
them
la
again and
calomnie
again
et la
through the
propagande.
slander of propaganda.
Celle de cette affiche
The
rouge qui
affiche
voulait
rouge, the
exciter les
red
peurs,
poster, which sought to excite
qui
fear
ne fortifia
and in
que la
fact
mort.
only strengthened love.
Car les vrais
Because
patriotes
true patriots
reconnurent dans ce rouge,
recognized in this
le rouge
red
du tricolore,
the red of the
le
tricolor
rouge des
flag,
premiers
the
uniformes des
red of the
soldats de
first
14, le
uniforms
rouge
of
des
the
matins
soldiers
de
of
Valmy, le
1914,
rouge
red of
du
the
sang
mornings of the
versé pour la
Battle of
France,
Valmy,
sur
red
lequel
blood
miroite
shed for
toujours une
France,
larme
on
de
which
bleu,
always shimmers a
un éclat de
tear
blanc.
of blue and a flash of white.
Est-ce ainsi que
Is
les hommes,
this how men
par-delà la mort,
survive
survivent?
beyond death?
Ils débordent l'existence
Their
par la
existence
mémoire,
persists through memory,
par les vers
in the
d'Aragon,
verses of
par
Aragon,
les chansons,
through songs
celles de Léo
like that of
Ferré et
Léo
de tant
Ferré
d'autres.
and so many others.
Mémoire portée
Memory
fidèlement par
faithfully
Arsène
carried by
Tchakarian,
Arsène
ancien du
Tchakarian,
FTP-MOI,
formerly of
ou par
FTP-MOI, or
Antoine
Antoine
Bagdikian, l'un et
Bagdikian,
l'autre
both
dévoués à
dedicated
honorer
to honoring
d'un même élan
with
la
the same
résistance des
enthusiasm the
Arméniens et la
resistance of
résistance
the
des
Armenians
en
and the
France,
resistance of the Jews in France,
portés par tant de
tireless
passeurs
guardians and transmitters
inlassables.
of history.
C'est ainsi que les hommes
This is how
survivent.
men survive.
C'est ainsi
This is how
que les grands hommes
the great men
en France
in French history
vivent pour
live for
l'éternité.
eternity.
Entre aujourd'hui au Panthéon
Today, in the
24 visages
Panthéon, 24 faces
parmi ceux des
from among
FTP,
those of the
MOI.
FTP-MOI.
24 visages
24
parmi
faces among the hundreds
les centaines
of
de combattants
fighters
et otages
and hostages
fusillés comme eux
shot
dans la
in
clairière
the
du Mont
Mont Valérien
Valérien
clearing,
et qui tous,
all of whom
désormais,
I have decided
sont reconnus
to
comme morts
recognize
pour la
as
France.
having died for France.
Oui,
Yes,
la France de
the France of
2024
2024
se devait d'honorer ceux qui furent
needed to
24
honor
fois la
those who were
France,
24 times
les honorer dans
France,
nos cœurs
honor them in our
et dans
hearts
notre recueillement.
and our thoughts,
Dans l'esprit des
in
jeunes
the minds
Français
of the young
venus
French
ici
people
pour
who
songer à
came
cette autre
here to
jeunesse
think of
passée,
these other youths
avant
who
elle,
passed before them,
étrangère,
foreign,
juive,
Jewish,
communiste,
communist,
résistante,
resistance fighters,
jeunesse de
the youth of
France,
France,
gardienne d'une
guardian
part
of
de
a
la noblesse
part
du
of the
monde.
nobility of the world.
Missak
Missak
Manouchian,
Manouchian,
vous entrez
you
ici en
enter
soldat
here as a soldier
avec vos
with your
camarades,
comrades,
ceux de
those
l'affiche
from the affiche,
du Mont
from
Valérien,
Mont Valérien,
avec
with
Golda, avec
Golda, with
Joseph,
Joseph,
et avec tous vos frères d'armes
and with all of your brothers
morts
in
pour la
arms
France.
who gave their lives for France.
Vous rejoignez avec eux les
You join
résistants.
the resistance
au
with
Panthéon.
them here in the Panthéon.
L'ordre de la nuit
The order of the night
est désormais
is
complet.
now complete.
Missak Manouchian,
Missak Manouchian,
vous entrez
you
ici
enter
toujours ivre
here
de vos rêves.
still drunk on your dreams.
L'Arménie
Armenia
délivrée
delivered
du
from
chagrin.
sorrow.
L'Europe fraternelle,
Fraternal Europe,
l'idéal
the
communiste,
communist
la
ideal,
justice,
justice,
la dignité,
dignity,
l'humanité,
humanity,
rêve
French
français,
dreams,
rêves universels.
universal dreams.
Missak
Missak
Manouchian,
Manouchian,
vous entrez
you enter
ici
here
avec
with
Méline,
Méliné
en poète
as a
de
poet
l'amour heureux.
who speaks of happy love,
Amour de la liberté,
love of freedom
malgré les prisons,
despite
la
prisons,
torture et la
torture,
mort.
and death,
Amour de la
love of
France,
France
malgré les
despite the
refus et les
refusals,
trahisons.
the betrayals,
Amour
love
des
of
hommes,
men,
ceux qui sont morts
of those who have died,
et ceux qui sont
and
à
those
naître.
who are yet unborn.
Aujourd'hui,
Today,
ce n'est plus le soleil d'hiver sur la
it is
colline.
no longer the winter sun on the hill.
Il pleut sur Paris.
It is raining in Paris
Et la
tonight,
France, reconnaissante,
and the grateful
accueille.
nation of France welcomes you.
Missak et
Missak
Méliné,
and Méliné,
destin d'Arménie et
destiny
de
of
France,
Armenia and France,
amour enfin
love
retrouvé.
finally found anew.
Missak,
Missak
les 23,
and the 23
et avec eux tous les
finally
autres,
celebrated.
enfin célébrés. L'amour
Love
et la liberté
and freedom
pour l'éternité.
for eternity.
Vive la République,
Vive la République.
vive la France.
Vive la France.
And that concludes this ceremony for the burial of Missak and Méliné Manouchian at the Panthéon ceremony. We're in the company of Marc Perelman and Andrew Smith. Marc, a speech that was saying this is a tribute to the ideals and a tribute to youth.
Absolutely. Youth, freedom, resistance, communism, all together embodied by the tragic destiny of Missak and his comrades, as he used to call them, how the president called them, of this group that were arrested in
Were you
1944.
surprised to hear in that speech Emmanuel Macron celebrate the ideals of the communists.
Well, he was celebrating people who embraced communism, resistance, and died because of that. And so there was no other way for him to do so. Obviously, Emmanuel Macron tends to wax lyrical, and this was no exception. Obviously, he hailed the values of youth, of resistance, of ideals, of literature. This is all what he loved. But this was a very solemn and moving tribute, the whole ceremony, because it was about all those foreigners who were poor, who were chased from their homelands, sometimes in tragic fashion, and who arrived in France, lived difficult lives, including Missak Manouchian, who worked in a Citroën factory not very far away from our studios here in Paris, and went to study, to learn French at the library, and really learned a new language, tried to build a new life. It was, again, hijacked, quote unquote, by the war, and he decided to resist and to fight. And those are values that the French nation decided to honor today, in a climate where being a foreigner and being someone with a name that doesn't sound French is not so popular. So there's also a significance today.
Andrew Smith, in the last days, has been controversy because Emmanuel Macron's Law and Order Interior Minister has been talking about revoking the right of blood for the right of soil, for those in the French overseas island of Mayotte, where there's lots of immigrants coming in. Is there a disconnect, or listening to that speech, you feel that this was Macron being true to Macron?
It's a challenge, isn't it? We are in a very difficult political moment. And I think, earlier on you talked about, was this a kind of riposte to criticism of Macron's immigration bill? And of course, we know it's much longer than this commitment to the Panthéonisation, the kind of the bringing into the Panthéon of these kind of resistance figures. It becomes something much more solemn, much more about these beliefs. I don't think we should be surprised to hear Macron borrowing from those political stripes, borrowing these ideas, these grand universal ideas, and seeking to position himself above those ideas of the kind of the parliamentary to and fro. Now, I do think there is really a disconnect, as you say, between this idea of denying people that right to become French. We heard in his speech there, of course, Manouchian had applied twice to become French. And that was something that was denied him, something that's granted in this moment. I think it's hugely important to realise that these are active choices to become something that speaks to the idea of the Republic. And that's something I think that perhaps could be more present within the politics of the president's majority, a commitment to those fundamental beliefs, perhaps.
Andrew Smith, thank you so much for joining us for London for this special edition. I want to thank as well Marc Perelman. Thank you for being with us here. There's more on the life of Michel Manouchian and Méline Manouchian on our website, France24.com. Stay with us.